Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode. In this program, we'll talk about how the prolonged US government shutdown has shaken the capital markets, and more importantly, how long it might last. As of November 8, 2025, the US federal government shutdown has dragged on for nearly 40 days, making it the longest in American history. The negative impact is growing day by day. With key government data no longer being released, the markets are now flying blind. So, why has this shutdown lasted so long? One crucial reason is that President Trump is using it to his advantage. Trump has repeatedly called the shutdown an unprecedented opportunity, a chance to dismantle federal agencies controlled by Democrats and to kill off their projects. He argues that doing so will clear out deadwood and save billions of dollars. According to reports, the Trump administration aims to cut up to 300,000 federal jobs before the end of the year. The Office of Management and Budget, often called OMB, has already directed agencies to prepare large-scale layoff plans. A list of targeted agencies is reportedly ready. Because of this political strategy, the White House has little incentive to end the shutdown quickly. Trump needs it as both a political weapon and a cover to pressure the Democrats. The result is a deep political deadlock. Trump, as we all know, often speaks without filters, like a child who can't keep a secret. He's laid his plan out in plain sight, and that has put Democrats on high alert. They are fighting back hard, especially on issues like Obamacare subsidies and mass layoffs, refusing to yield an inch. That's why this shutdown is fundamentally different from any in the past, and its impact on the market has been profound. For example, on October 15th, the U.S. Department of Defense announced the suspension of cobalt procurement tenders, which immediately triggered a sharp sell-off in the critical mineral sector. Investors realized that as long as the government remains shut, similar activities would halt as well, a grim signal that sent markets into panic mode. The suspension of key agencies like the Department of Labor has also frozen vital data releases such as the non-farm payroll report. Without those numbers, traders are essentially flying blind. But perhaps the most critical consequence lies in liquidity. During the shutdown, the U.S. Treasury General Account, known as the TGA, continues collecting taxes but can't spend as usual. That's caused the TGA balance to balloon to around $1 trillion, effectively draining over $1 trillion in liquidity from the market, a tightening effect comparable to several rounds of Federal Reserve rate hikes. That liquidity crunch has pushed short-term funding rates, such as SOFR, sharply higher. Stocks, gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies have all corrected, while the US dollar has remained firm. If the shutdown continues, the Treasury will keep pulling liquidity out of the system, and that could trigger a much steeper correction in US equities. Politically, things are beginning to shift. Trump's administration came into this battle with an ambitious plan to weaken Democratic influence. But the results of the early November local elections have shaken that confidence. Democrats scored sweeping victories in key races Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City, even though these are traditionally blue states. The margin of victory, however, was huge enough to reignite Democratic confidence after last year's defeats. They now believe that their hardline stance is paying off, and that will only embolden them to dig in deeper. For Republicans, the message is the opposite. As the party in power, they're taking the blame for the shutdown's damage. Analysts estimate that each week of a full federal shutdown costs the economy billions, if not tens of billions of dollars. Meanwhile, public frustration is mounting. Hundreds of thousands of non-essential federal workers have been furloughed without pay, while those in essential roles, air traffic controllers, Secret Service agents, and the prison guards must keep working without paychecks. The problem is obvious. Bills don't wait. Mortgages, rent, tuition, and groceries, they're all fixed expenses. Even if back pay eventually comes, it won't cover the short-term stress. At some point, that anger will turn toward the Trump administration. So politically, Trump's team will have to make concessions. On the other hand, if Democrats keep holding their ground and refuse any deal, public anger could shift toward them instead. That creates a window for compromise. So when might the US government reopen? Nobody really knows, not even insiders. But we can still simplify this complex picture by looking at key upcoming dates. Let's go through 3 critical time points in November. First, November 15th. If the shutdown continues beyond this date, active duty military personnel may miss their next paycheck. Trump knows how serious that is. He has made rebuilding the defense industrial base a top priority, ensuring the US military's readiness for future great power conflicts. Even while cutting other expenses, his administration has increased defense spending. And politically, Trump values his support among military families. Their frustration is not something he can afford to ignore. Second, November 17th. This marks the second missed payday for many federal workers, including air traffic controllers. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, has already announced a 10% reduction in flights across 40 major airports due to staffing shortages. If that cut deepens, the result will be massive delays and cancellations nationwide. Third, November 27th, Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is one of the most important holidays in the US, when millions of Americans travel at the same time. If the shutdown is still crippling flight operations by then, it will be a public relations disaster for the Trump administration. And that's the key. For all his toughness, Trump is also pragmatic. When it's time to back down, he can do it quickly, even gracefully. So, the days before Thanksgiving are likely to be a turning point, the most probable window for the government to reopen. Once the federal government resumes operations, it will trigger a massive liquidity release. Remember that $1 trillion sitting idle in the Treasury's account? It will start flowing back into the economy like an instant wave of monetary easing, almost like a hidden round of quantitative easing. That would be a major bullish catalyst for US stocks, cryptocurrencies, precious metals, and the Treasury bonds alike. So, keep an eye on those dates and be ready. When Washington finally reopens, the markets won't take long to celebrate. That's all for today's episode. Follow me for more insights and investment opportunities around the world.